on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Welcome to the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Join Dylan and Max, both with experience in flight instruction, the airlines, and business aviation, as they talk to a variety of industry experts, share stories, and have a little fun along the way.
All right, we're back, Max. And, long distance relationships are tough, but you got to make it work, especially if you're a pilot, right?
That's right.
We're talking about our,
do what we can.
Our long distance recording studio we've got to use today. Lots going on. But you found a way. You've overcome bad Wi-Fi.
We always do.
That's right. Excited for another great episode, number 74. Welcome, aviators. My name is Dylan. I'm a professional pilot in the business aviation arena, and I'm joined by my co-host, Max.
Yes, I'm a airline pilot as well as still a business aviation pilot. It's very complicated.
Very complicated, just like long-distance relationships. We're excited for a great show today. We've got Erik Sabiston joining us from RTAG, the charity that helps military veterans transition over to be commercial pilots. Also joined by Jordan Scales to talk about the Auburn Business Aviation Days that they had last year and the upcoming Business Aviation Day they've got with the Central Florida Business Aviation Association. So lots of great stuff for you on this episode. But first, we've got to start off with some shout outs to our listeners, Dustin and Thomas, who both purchased those fancy hats, the one that you're actually wearing right now.
Yeah.
Those are $55 on the website, 215podcast.com. And if you make the donation, I know it's a lot for a hat, but it's to support the show. It's for a good cause.
Essentially, it's $20 to the show. The rest are costs of the hat, but it is a very high quality. It's a sick hat, so.
We get a lot of compliments. We heard from a listener who purchased one. He said, thanks for your show. Been a listener since the beginning and share it with many others. Keep up the great work from the team at Rocky Aviation Insurance. Can't wait for my 21.5 hat. Sweet. Okay, Dustin. It's on the way. Hopefully it's already there. Lots to get to today, Max. So let's jump into the segments. We got a couple of reviews, which means I need to send some stickers out to some folks who wrote us a review. You want to read them?
Sure. Informative, entertaining, and thought-provoking. I started listening September of 2021 and really enjoyed your content. I love how nothing is off limits. Discussion is open and honest, and the show has demonstrated to me that there's always more to learn. I'm an ag pilot, but aspire to fly cabin class in the off-season to keep my skills sharp. This podcast is helping to stoke that fire more and more all the time. Thanks, guys. From Cade S.
Well, that's pretty cool. I think that's the first ag pilot we've heard from, except for our buddy Ken, who did the crop dusting episode with us. Next up, review says, great podcast for professional pilots. Love this podcast. It's a great balance between entertainment and technical information. As a pilot about to make the transition from corporate aviation to a legacy airline, I would love to hear an episode with other pilots that have made this transition and what they loved and hated about it. Thanks. And then he says, James O'Neill rules, which we might have to edit out because James' ego is already pretty large. I don't know if he needs to hear that. And that's from M. Boetti.
I suppose I could talk about that at some point.
Yes.
A lot of good, a lot of bad, it's very different.
Yeah. I think we're going to put together an episode on that. You know what I want to do? I think you're obviously going to find a lot of corporate pilots that made the switch and like, oh, it's great. But I want to find the corporate pilot that made the switch that doesn't like it and is trying to go back.
Yeah, I was just going to say that because I think the one thing that I tell a lot of business aviation pilots when they're hesitant about the airlines, I'm like, look, give it a shot. If you don't like it, you still have all of your type ratings. Just go back. In this market, that's easier, I think, than it has been in the past. So I would love to talk to somebody that did that and then didn't like it and went back to business aviation.
That's right. So if you are that person, hit us up, info@215podcast.com. We'd love to chat with you and have a different perspective to share with our listeners. On to the mailbag, which is, of course, brought to you by our friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy. They're responsible for creating all of the great educational content that your flight department needs to keep your folks educated. aircrewacademy.com. You can browse their selection of offerings, read their blog, listen to their subject matter experts on our show, a virtual cornucopia of knowledge.
It's a veritable cornucopia of knowledge.
Well, I've said virtual because it's online. So maybe it's both. Yeah. Email number 1, comes in and says, I think this is from Rod. He says, hey guys, great podcast. Enjoy the content and the entertainment. Quick recommendation for your cooler. I would always freeze my day 3 and 4 meals in Tupperware, which really prolongs the method of ice you choose and fit perfectly in the bottom of the cooler. My preferred method of an ice holder was a Camelback water bladder that when frozen was very narrow and resided on the top of my food in the large lower cooler. I also use a Clarity Aloft and still do at the airlines and a carabiner connection to the cooler. So that's his strategy.
Anybody else that has clever food on the road tricks? I have a few of my own, but I think we should solicit from everybody out there that's kind of figured it out, and we'll do a segment on that. I think would be really interesting for some people. Some people it'll be a complete waste of time, but
it could be a 4-part series just on how you do coffee.
Well, that's
so we got a lot of ground to cover there on the
right.
commuting meals
Lot to unpack.
situation. So let's see. Next email. You want to read it?
Yeah. I listen to your podcast regularly and believe you provide some accurate info for future pilots. I'm a recently retired airline pilot and will add my 2 cents to some of your comments. Commuting. I've worked for 3 airlines and commuted for 31 years. You're right. It's a lot of wasted time. However many times you or your spouse have family for support in a city that is not in a domicile or the domicile is downsized or outright closed. In my case, the family support took precedent and I never questioned it again. The spouse has 2 jobs at home and expects relief when the pilot comes home. I was not able to join many local sports leagues and other local activities because my preference for days off depended on my family's activities. Many of my friends lived in other cities. Crash pads can be clean and fun or disgusting and unlivable many times, depending on how much you want to spend. Airline flying. I think for a lot of people on the airlines, you develop an addiction and your coworkers become family. You and your coworkers pull together in bad times and celebrate in good times and thus become very close. Airline life also has a high incidence of AIDS, which is the aviation-induced divorce syndrome. I enjoy your podcast and your frank discussions. I think that it helps a lot of aspiring pilots. Keep going. Ex-captain Felix Hernandez. Yeah, he's right. Obviously, I'm always vehemently opposed to commuting, but there are certainly situations where it's a personal choice. You evaluate the pros and cons and you make the call.
Yeah. And, like Felix mentioned, base closures or downsizing, there's probably a time in your career you're going to commute. It is what it is.
There's a 100% chance, I think, in your career, 99, that you're going to commute at some point, which I'll tell you what, if you don't ever commute, I don't think you are able to appreciate living in base as much as you would.
That's true.
You have to have contrast.
Got to live in that crash pad at least once. But he's right. Those are some of the trade-offs that you have when he says, I couldn't join a sports league and some other local activities because of my days off and the bidding and the commuting. We do something cool for a career and it's an awesome career. But there are some sacrifices that you may not think.
I think my message with the whole commuting situation is that I just want to make sure people take that into strong account when choosing what airline they want to work for, especially right now when you have more of a choice than I think is historically there's been. So I just want to make sure people understand what commuting entails for people that have never done it. They're coming out of the military or whatever, and that's my torch.
That's your torch. It's a good torch to be on. That is the mailbag. Appreciate everyone that wrote in with their comments. If you've got something for the mailbag, it's info@215podcast.com. Or you can shoot us a message on LinkedIn, too. We actually get a lot of mailbag stuff from LinkedIn as well. We'll have a link to that in the show notes if you want to connect on that platform. Coming up next, the Harvey Watt Diamond Dogs Flight Advice. Dun, dun, dun. So here's some good twist on flight advice for us, Max. We have a guest Diamond Dog, I guess, today, which is Robert Shapiro. The good news with this flight advice, he's given the advice. All we've got to do is say if we think it's a good idea or not. So thanks for making our life easy today, Robert. If you want to give some flight advice or ask for some flight advice, you can visit our website for the anonymous form, or you can just shoot us an email and we'll be happy to give you our thoughts. All right, on to Robert's advice. He says, good afternoon, Dylan and Max. I was listening to your podcast this morning on my drive to the airport, and you were talking about volunteering. I think you should introduce your listeners to the idea of becoming a volunteer firefighter/EMT. Many Americans don't realize that 70% of the fire departments in the U.S. are volunteer fire departments. I've been volunteering as a firefighter/paramedic for the last 22 years. It is by far the most rewarding and exhilarating thing I do. Volunteer fire/EMS departments generally require a 4 to 8 hour per week commitment and can often be done overnight. They pay for all your training from basic firefighter and EMT-B courses all the way through a 2 or 4 year degree in paramedicine. One of the 2 departments that I volunteer for even pays scholarship money towards any type of training. I'm currently using the scholarship to pay for my gyrocopter commercial in CFI. And then he says, I'm available to talk more on the subject if you'd like. Long story short, it beats scooping mashed potatoes at the soup kitchen.
Yeah, he has a great point. Though my only comment on that, I think that's awesome, is I wanted to do something similar, which is this search and rescue thing here in where we live. And one of the requirements is, I think after 12 months that you had to have at least a basic EMT. Okay. And getting the EMT done was really difficult because you can't miss a class. They don't tolerate missing classes very well. So that was my hang up. But I think now might be something I could make happen, because it would be really bad if you went through the whole course and then you had a trip at the end that popped up and you couldn't.
Right.
Went through all of it for nothing.
Well, I think this brings us back around to the listener at last episode, I think, that said, hey, I'm a flight instructor. How can I stand out? The one thing that's nice about being a flight instructor is typically you have a little bit of control over your schedule, right? And you're not going to be on the overnight. So while you're being a CFI, maybe you have a little control. This would be a great time to knock it out, because you could instruct during the day and take the class in the evening, or vice versa, depending on what you're doing. But another great way to help the community and help yourself, really.
Yeah, so the outside flying stuff, that's a great example. And it's very interesting. It sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, and a great way to give back as well. So great suggestion, Robert. Maybe we'll chat with him one of these times and figure out how it actually works. So thanks for the advice. We've got some more advice for you. And of course, that is to visit harveywatt.com and check out all of the coverages they provide professional pilots: loss of medical insurance, life insurance with hardly any exclusions. They've got you covered. Over 70,000 professional pilots worldwide trust Harvey Watt to protect them and their medical certificate. And just in case you have an encounter with an EMT or a volunteer fireman on the receiving end of their services, you and your family will be protected. That's just a professional ad read there for you. harveywatt.com. Okay, coming up, Erik Sabiston. He's going to break down everything that RTAG is up to help veterans transition from the military to being a professional pilot in the civilian world. Here we go. Max, I'm very excited to have Erik Sabiston joining us today. We've been circling each other like two beasts out in the wilderness for months, maybe even years, trying to connect and find a time to record. Now it's time for the predators to go in for the kill.
Nothing like early on Saturday morning to get this all together.
That's right. Welcome to the program, Erik. Thanks for joining us.
Man, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Erik, you are the president of RTAG, which is the Rotary to Airline Group. You're a military veteran, major airline pilot, author, many things. We've got a lot of stuff we want to cover today. So let's start off by talking about the Rotary to Airline Group. How did it start? What is it now? And how are you helping veterans get jobs?
Yeah, well, RTAG is a veteran to aviation charity. We started out as a helicopter-centric group in 2017, really as a Facebook group. And from there, it just became an actual convention. Like you would go to it and look for employment. We expected 100 people at our first event, and we had like 750. And the news station showed up trying to figure out what all these people were hanging out for. Since then, it's grown. We do an event every year. And we also do mentorship for veterans. We do scholarships. We have a lot of those that we give away. Civilians are absolutely welcome. We have discounts and things like that. We work directly with airlines, corporate charter, cargo, fractional ACMI, helicopter companies as well, operators. And we also work directly with the U.S. military. We help them recruit as well. So we try to replenish the veterans that are leaving with new would-be veterans. And that's forced us to change our focus, change our name, which is actually now RTAG, the Veteran to Aviation Charity. What's kind of cool about it is that we're just as big as at the other ones, but we don't charge money to veterans to come. So you're not going to pay $300-400 to get in. If you're a veteran or a service member or a family member, and if you're a civilian, we want you to come out and hang out too and party with us. But We asked for a small donation. I think last year most folks gave about $25, and that's perfectly fine. And again, all the money that we bring in, we don't keep any of it. 100% goes to those scholarships that I mentioned. So yeah, it's just a fun way to give back. And for those of us who are already at where we want to be, it's an excuse to hang out once a year and party.
That's awesome. So last year you guys did it, what was it, in San Diego, right?
Yeah.
How many people were at that event?
We estimate that from what we can get in a good count, about 2,300. And we had about 100 vendors, legacies, all the way down to flight schools, colleges, vendors. We rented out the Port Pavilion Convention Center, and then we rented out the USS Midway aircraft carrier, and we partnered with the San Diego International Film Festival. And then we had a party down there at the Kansas City Barbecue with some old Top Gun instructors. And there were a few parties as well. The airlines and the companies, they have their own parties. It was a whirlwind weekend, and we have one coming up in Texas this fall. And I'd love for everybody to come and join us.
And that's kind of like the last hiring event of the year traditionally, right? The way you guys have it scheduled.
Yeah, we go to great pains because we love the other events too. I never seem to get off to go to them. But yeah, I love the other events, Women Aviation, MBAA. So we try to schedule RTAG to make sure it doesn't interfere with anybody else. Because I think it's important for pilots to get as many opportunities. If we can't provide them, then somebody should be. But yeah, we're the 21st, which is a Friday, that's the parties. And then the 22nd and 23rd, this is all in October, are the actual convention proper. The weekend after, well, it's Halloween. So it's the end of the year. You're right.
That's awesome. So talk to us a little bit about the origins of RTAG, the rotary connotation. How did this all get started?
The rotor stink, right? Yeah. It's funny. I was able to communicate back through a friend in Hollywood to Captain Sully and tell him about what we were doing. He gave us a thumbs up, his approval. And I think what it stemmed from was the wars. The last 20 years, we've been fighting these wars, and the two most deployed formations or groups of people are the Special Forces and rotorcraft aviation, mostly Army and the other services as well. And if you go to war for a year, every other year, for 20 years, it just kind of wears on you. A lot of guys and gals were just burnt out. We saw that there was a rotor transition program at Envoy. They started it, the old American Eagle.
Shout out Eagle. Max and I are both former alumni.
Yeah. Well, you guys led the way, man. I mean, honestly, I think American does a great job. I was at the Helicopter Expo in Texas looking for a job. I had written my book and I had flown a bit. I was looking for a way to get out and fly helicopters for like a hospital. And I couldn't get arrested. They said I didn't have enough hours. Well, the fact is, if you're flying people to the hospital, you generally don't want to take the long way. So I had a lot of sorties, but not a lot of flight time. And I couldn't get a job. I met a buddy of mine named Mitch Bell. At the time, he was a 7-8 to FO for American. We went to Herrera's and had a little taco dinner. His call sign's Taco, Mitchell Bell, right? And he slid his paycheck across the table, and I looked at it and I said, I might make a pretty good airline pilot. So I did it. I just GA'd on my own, got my ratings. My friend Josh Lee, my buddy, we started this Facebook group, and we helped other Army aviators and then naval aviators, Air Force pilots, Marine Corps, Coast Guard. It blew up, and that's where it came from. It just started to snowball. There was a point where I was actually called to the Pentagon and asked to help the military understand what RTAG was, which was a little bit tense. But by the end, I said, look, I'm here to help you recruit as well. So it's a Facebook group is all it is. For the airlines, it's a little bit different. They're looking at the ATP minimums, right? 1,500 hours. But if you're a military pilot, even a rotorcraft pilot, you can get your ATP in as little as 750 total. As long as you meet the fixed wing minimums, 250 PIC and so forth. So that was their ticket around the 1,500 hour rule. Of course, there's a lot of airlines that said, oh, these guys, they're terrible, they can't fly or whatever, it's not going to work. But in 2018, the pilot source study, which was briefed to the FAA, independent study drawn on data from these regionals, showed that helicopter pilots actually required less IOE and less additional training. So as where there are some people that might struggle a little bit, the overall results were that the RTPs were successful. And so then it snowballed again at PSA, Piedmont, SkyWest, Republic, you name it. There was pretty much an RTP at every regional pre-pandemic. And now post-pandemic, however you want to call it, we're actually seeing rotorcraft pilots get into the majors, Sun Country, iAero, which used to be called Swift, and even Frontier has graduated a rotorcraft pure pilot, saved the ATP minimums, and he crushed the training. He showed up to training, that one in particular individual, and he had every note, caution, warning, flow, profile, call out, MAI limit memorized cold on day one. And they're like, goodness gracious.
Wow.
So there's a real hunger for that. And now actually that the rotorcraft stuff's kind of taken off, our main focus now historically has been helping the enlisted people. So we help enlisted folks get to the ATP as well. And they just come out in their traditional CFIs, building their time. The only difference is through a combination of programs like WIOA, VRNE, credentialing assistance, GI Bill, they can get all their training, including their time building, for no money out of pocket and still get a degree. So they're cadets, but they're not broke and they're not eating ramen noodles. So that's the difference right there.
So I have a question. Before RTAG and even before these programs at the regionals, if you were a military helicopter pilot and you got out, do you have any statistics on what percentage of those pilots went to fixed wing aviation and ultimately the airlines? Or what was normally the path? Or did they just stick to usually what they knew and fly oil rigs and medevac? Or what was it like before?
Yeah, I never got that question. That's a great question, honestly. The traditional path was there was no path. The Army operates a limited amount of fixed wing aircraft, Dashes, C-12s, some jets, some Gulfstream products. But that was always for the secret squirrel group, the little mafia of, hey, you're a good guy, I'm a good guy, I know you're getting out. Here you go, get some fixed wing time. And so they started a group in, I think it was maybe the mid-'80s, late 80s, called Army Pilot to Airlines, APTAP. That was a website is what it was. Yeah, I remember it. So maybe 2-3%, hardly any.
Yeah. I've flown with people that were Army aviators and helicopter pilots, but it certainly is far and few between. So that's kind of why I'm asking. I'm just curious of what did those people do?
Not much, man. I'm sure it could be bigger, but sure, it's the low single digits of people that would actually do it. Those of us who would get a private or something, we just did it because we thought it was cool. With a glut of post-Vietnam helicopter pilots, the rotorcraft industry had their pickings. And that's why you would see helicopter jobs start at minimum 2,500 hours total, minimum 1,500 hours PIC turbine, all these super high numbers, and you'd make 40 grand.
So what kind of numbers are we talking as far as flight time traditionally when you get out of the military or after 10 years or whatever? Do you have any sort of swag on that? Like how much time guys get out with?
Let's just take a typical community because there are differences for sure.
Sure.
But I'll just take what I know because I was a mechanic and a pilot, the Black Hawk, right? If you were in the early 2000s, it wasn't unheard of for a guy to get 1,000 hours in a year in rotorcraft. But the military, well, at least the Army, and I think the Navy's the same way, has a minimum of like around 100 a year. So if you're a staff officer or you're a guy or gal who didn't get to deploy, you could be facing some pretty low time. I think right now it's probably, I don't know what, say you do 10 years now, you probably come out with at least 2,000, 3,000 hours or so of rotorcraft time.
Just recently was flying around in helicopters a bunch. And the funny thing about it is the flight time sort of seems irrelevant to an extent because the guy that was flying would do more landings in a day than I would do all year.
Yeah.
Another thing too is he would never engage the autopilot. And so,
oh no, you don't. Yeah.
It's such an intense day of flying compared to what we do in the airlines or even business aviation. I was like,
it's different. My buddy C.W. Lemoyne, he's a mover, he's a author and everything. He's got a great YouTube channel. I think he was an F-16 pilot and now he's an F-18 pilot. So he went from maybe the Air National Guard to the Navy Reserve. But yeah, he's getting his commercial right now. It's interesting to see how he does. Actually, I took a break when the pandemic happened. I went back to Fort Rucker, Alabama, where the Army teaches flight school and just taught as a contractor. It was a blast. Having had that jet time, that airplane time of a decent amount, and then going back to it made you appreciate it so much more. It's truly poetic almost. The ability to just hover and back up and hang there in the air. But I still missed air conditioning, so I came back.
Yeah, it is so cool. The helicopter world, while still flying machines, is so different from what we do as fixed wing pilots. Where I was flying, the clouds were low and the visibility's bad. And it was a bunch of other fixed wing pilots mostly that we were with. And you could see we walk out in the morning, everyone's looking at each other like, are we actually going to fly in this? Like, this is not VFR. And people were having like serious reservations. I'm like, you guys, this is a completely different world. They can stop in the air. We're going
Yeah.
60 knots usually. You need to understand and know what you don't know here and trust the professionals like we ask all of our passengers to do. I'm like,
Well, it's kind of sad. It's a good point. So like airplanes, there's great money to be made in the corporate world. And any major, I flew with a guy at Frontier when I was there, and that captain made 68 grand in that month. That's ridiculous.
Wow.
That's more than a helicopter pilot makes all year. So if you're an operator of a helicopter, if you have 2 or 3 of them, a small business, or you have a hospital program or a community EMS program, you're not paying those guys to go in the clouds. You're paying them to go point A to point B as fast as you can, get that refrigerator on top of that building, move that log out of the trees over here. You become proficient as an instrument pilot when you get your instrument ticket, just like you do in the airplane. It's just you probably never get to do it again because no one will pay you to do it. The military is different. You do get paid to do it there, but yet you can't rescue people and you can't blow up bad guys through the clouds generally. So you spend a lot of time in Indian country, as we call it.
I think it's hard for fixed wing pilots to gain an appreciation for what the rotorcraft guys do and gals until you sit in the back for a day and watch that. And I was just for fun, but it's impressive to watch because when we're flying at the airlines, it doesn't require 100% of your attention 100% of the time. The only break they get is when they're on the ground for a few minutes.
I wouldn't even use the trim. When I started out, I was so new, and my buddy looked over and I had this almost of a hole in my thumb. He's like, "What are you doing over there?" And I would just press the trim button down and fly it around because that's what my old Vietnam Huey pilot taught me, right? He'd been shot down in Vietnam. So I'm just sitting over there muscling the aircraft over on the left and the right and the sides and up and down on my own. And he's like, "Dude, set the trim." I'm like, "Trim? Nice.
How about
I
that?
like it."
This is a good invention.
I was joking with a buddy of mine a couple of days ago, and he's a helicopter pilot too. He said, when airline pilots say, "Oh, that's moderate chop," or "That's a moderate turbulence," he said, "I just call that hovering." It's the same thing. I mean, it's a different world. It is more challenging, I think, for the stick and rudder flying, the hand flying, to come to the airlines and then engage the autopilot and trust the systems. You just want to always disconnect it and fly it. I flew the 145 for commute air. That was cool because we did a lot of hand flying. It was fun. It's kind of nice to have an autopilot now. And
Yeah, well,
it's
long term, let's be honest.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
Well, I'm curious. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are. Can you tell us what the process is now? So you're a guy or gal, just got out of the military. You're a helicopter pilot and you want to be a major airline pilot. What do you do? How does it work?
Great. Well, in my opinion, there's a lot of different paths. If you're a low-time guy or gal, certainly you're going to make a trip to the regionals. And to be frank, a lot of our members have 20 years. They have free health care. They got some VA disability, which doesn't keep them from holding a class 1, and they just stay at their regionals. Because if you were a helicopter pilot in the Army, your pinnacle would be teaching as a contractor at Fort Rucker, right? You make 110, 115. You're like, wow, I've arrived. I'm going to be rich. Because that plus your 36 grand a year you get in retirement, man, you can live very comfortably. But for a lot of rotorcraft pilots now, they'll go to the regionals. And how they do that? Well, they got to get the licenses. So as long as you wake up on one Saturday during flight school and go down and take the test, you're a commercial instrument rated pilot. So now you have 2 options. You can either A, get a private, which gets you PIC earlier, or you can just do an additional category in class, Part 141, a 55
Wait, hold on.
hour.
So if you take the test, you're a commercial instrument rated rotorcraft pilot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so now you need to transition to fixed wing, which you can go get a private pilot fixed wing certificate is what you're saying.
You can do either. You can take a commercial rotorcraft and go straight to the commercial airplane. You don't need to do a private. The only reason that you would do a private is for 2 reasons. Well, number one, you want to get the extra PIC time quicker because you can't log PIC if you just go straight to the commercial until you're done with the check ride. Or number 2, you just got a really great school and you dig that school and that's what you want to do. The problem comes from funding, and I can talk about that as well, but the GI Bill funding does not cover the private unless you're at a collegiate 141 school that's been approved. So a lot of your listeners who are veterans are going to say, "Oh, wait, I can't get my private with the GI Bill." You can. You can get your private with the GI Bill. You just have to be going towards a degree, which about 40% of the Army helicopter pilots don't have. I met a helicopter pilot in Afghanistan, a Black Hawk pilot. He was 18 years old, literally, in Afghanistan, in Jalalabad. So you can go straight from, we call it high school to flight school. But those rotorcraft pilots, they'll either go private or commercial, and they'll get their instrument, then they'll get their multi, and then they'll just build up their time. I think generally most folks are around 300 hours of total fixed wing. before they go on to their airline of choice. And again, they can either go to a regional, all the regionals hire them. And again, right now there's 3 low-cost carriers that do it, or ACMIs. I know of at least a couple more I can't really mention that are interested in it. And I know that JetBlue in 2019 at their Vets in Blue in December of 2019 announced that they were interested in starting an RTP. And we at RTAG talk to corporate operators and other folks that are also interested in these pathway programs as well. So you either do the private and up to ATP, or you do you just go straight to the commercial and go up. The advantage of the commercial, obviously, if you do the single engine, is you don't have to do all the maneuvers for the multi. But again, you got to get that PIC and you got to build that time. And that's how we help the veterans. We help them pay for it. In the military, well, in the Army, you can get credentialing assistance depending on which component, whether you're active, reserve, guard. You can get $4,000 a year for your flight training. So you can do that. Then as you're getting close to leaving the military, you can do what's called Dod Skill Bridge. That's 180 days of free internship where you will go work for a flight school, or maybe you're a mechanic and you're doing mechanic work, but you're also flying. You can do that for 180 days and it's illegal. It's against the law for the business to pay you because you're getting full pay and benefits. Thank you, taxpayers. So now you're a free employee, and you can also net that company tax credits, the Returning Heroes tax credit, the Wounded Warrior tax credit, all these tax credits that literally can pay businesses to hire veterans. I tell airlines all the time, if you're looking for diversity, I'm sorry, I went to college too. You're probably not going to find it at Embry-Riddle like you will at, say, the motor pool on your local Marine Corps base. If you're looking for people of different backgrounds and diversity, the military is a great place to go get them to work for you for free and get paid while you do it. And then there's other programs as well. There's WIOA, which will pay $8,000, at least it did for me. It paid for my commercial and my instrument, $8,000 per veteran. It's just a grant for your flight training. And then there's VR&E. If you hurt yourself, you get a little disability, most vets get something. Usually it's hearing or something like that. Then they get vocational rehab, VR&E. That will give you 2 years of basic college, plus a $900 some odd $940 a month housing allowance. So now you're getting 2 years of that. As long as you use that up and you don't use your GI Bill first, you get that housing allowance. Then you can go to the GI Bill for another 3 years. So the ideal candidate to me gets all their training done before they even leave. But if they don't, then they use these programs. They get the VR&E. They get their flight training. It'll cover, I've seen VR&E cover a type rating on a 737. I have. Then you'll end up with probably 3 years of GI Bill. That, coupled with your current ratings, should allow you to get a degree on your overnights as a new FO at any operator. So now you're getting paid an additional allotment of like $940 a month for housing. So you can see where a veteran can come in and literally pay the employers to hire them, and they're not going to be in debt. And the lastly thing I'll say is for operators, I think a lot of folks, I don't know about where you guys fly, they're worried about people staying in the left seat and not moving on to FedEx or something like that. Well, enlisted people, you don't have a degree usually, so they're not going anywhere. You're not a military wing pilot. You don't have a ton of jet time or airplane time. You're probably going to stay in that left seat long term. So I say for operators and companies, if you're worried about maintaining captains, I got your solution. It's called E2A, enlisted to airline. And there are some schools that have created programs just called that, E2A.
Okay, so I was going to ask you a lot about the recruiting piece of this to get people into the military, and I think you've done a great job of covering a lot of the reasons why you'd want to do it. But Max and I have this conversation often. If I had a kid who wanted to be a pilot long term, how would we get there? How would we guide them to get there with the least amount of debt and the most amount of options? So let's say I am a high school senior listening to this, and I'm thinking, wow, maybe the military is the right way for me to do this. How do you advise somebody that's looking to go into the military with the ultimate goal of being a professional pilot?
That's a good point. How do you do it? You got to treat them like an individual and listen. Most of what I do is listening to people talk, and that's kind of the fun of this thing. I don't get to do it as much as I used to because now we got to run a charity. But I love to hear people tell me, like, what is your goal? What do you want to do? Do you just love your country? You really want to go out and you want to serve God, flag, and apple pie and all that? Great. Go in the military and do your time, because when you get winged, that's let's just say the easiest way possible would be a warrant officer. You come in the Army and you're 18, you go in, you have to go to boot camp, you got to go to flight school, officers candidate school, and all that stuff. it's 2 years till you get your wings. Then you owe the Army 10 years. When's the next pilot hiring wave? Probably somewhere past that, right? So you're stuck, and fine, stay, and it's a good career, and you'll be traditional, and you'll probably go to 20 because you're over the hump. You've only got 8 years left. Why not get that free benefit? But if you're interested in doing both and being a professional airline pilot, I like the National Guard. We could talk about the other services because I'm very familiar with what they do. They go to college and do this all first. But no matter what you do, I say you come in, you get your wings, you get to your local unit, and then as soon as you meet those restricted ATP minimum, you can start applying. In fact, you don't even need to wait. At RTAG Fort Rucker, our third one, we had rotorcraft pilots pinning their wings at Fort Rucker and then getting hired by Republic and SkyWest the next day with only about 120 hours in their logbook total. It was a conditional offer. I mean, hey, we're going to hire you, but you have a year to get to 750 or whatever. And they did, and they're currently flying the line. So yeah, you get the wings, you come in part-time as a military pilot, and then you do the airline thing. And that takes your requirement for total time and cuts it in half. Seniority is everything, right? So now you're at the regional, you're building time. And then on the weekends, you're like, I would take that junky trip to Des Moines, but I got military leave, haha. So now you can't do it. And you just build yourself up, that way, get your time going. The other thing that does is provides you TRICARE, which is healthcare. That's a great benefit, and it's super cheap compared to what I'm paying. That's for sure. And then obviously we have folks that do the other way. They go to the National Guard, the Air Force Reserve, the Navy Reserve. In fact, we help a lot of civilian guys. We've helped several, I know, civilian regional airline captains transition and go over and fly F-16s, F-35, and do it part-time. You're like, I'm an airline guy, or I'm a corporate guy, I fly for FlexJet, and I really want to fly C-17s. Okay, cool. But that's the way I say you do it, because then you get the best of both worlds. Do the military and then do the airline thing. And look, God forbid there's ever, like a pandemic when you get furloughed. Hey, can I get on orders, sir? Yeah, no problem. Come on. And we'll put you to work until this thing blows over. Of course, you might end up in Ukraine the way things are going these days, but it's a small price to pay.
That's really interesting. Anything else you want to hit on RTAG before we move on?
Just that I want folks to understand it's not for just helicopter pilots, and it's not for veterans. I've ever seen Captain Roger Victor was broadcasting from the front of it, and I want people to come and have a good time. Again, I love the other events, but when I got out, I thought, why am I paying $450 and there's a pilot shortage? Maybe I should be paying nothing. And that's the way we want to keep it. Come out to Fort Worth Convention Center, October 21st, 22nd, 23rd. Join us. There is no dress code, but I would suggest a suit. I'm sure we'll have all the legacies and majors and pretty much everybody there. It's a great time. The parties are free, the foods are free, the drinks are free, and we love it. If you don't know any military folks, it's a great time to come hang out with us and realize that we don't all look like The Rock. A lot of us are just fat guys like me walking around trying to buy Wheaties in the grocery store. We're just normal guys.
That sounds like an incredible time. Our friend James O'Neill was at that event last year.
Yeah, he's been there with Raven. Fantastic. Did my prep for Frontier. I love Raven. Yeah, he's been there for all of them, and he's coming out again this year. So you'll have a lot of friends there for sure.
That's great. Well, I wanted to ask you about some of the other stuff you're up to, because it sounds like you're just sitting around twiddling your thumbs. Don't have much going on, but this thing called the Icarus Device. Can you explain what this is? It looks like this a hood on steroids, maybe. What is this thing?
Yeah, well, it's a long story, but a few years back, about 2015, I wrote a book. It did okay, and I didn't know it, but the young helicopter pilot, Purdue astronautical engineer, read it, and he said it inspired him. And so he contacted me 5 years later, telling me about this device. I had been inadvertent several times. When you enter the clouds unexpectedly for helicopter pilots and general aviation pilots, it's a real danger. In fact, NTSB said that for the pilots of light aircraft and helicopters who go into the clouds and didn't know what was going to happen, and they crash, 86% of them die, which is a startling number. You have a lot of famous crashes, obviously JFK Jr., most recently Kobe Bryant. So this device that this engineer, his name's Nick Sinopoli, invented is basically a hood. It just looks like a big shield. If you've ever seen Star Wars when Luke's there with Obi-Wan, and it kind of looks like that. It's super lightweight, it's like 3 ounces. And what's cool about it, though, is it changes. It can go from clear all the way to cloudy, and you can adjust how fast it goes. You can adjust how much it goes. Like you can do a quarter mile, half a mile, stuff like that. And what's neat about that is if you guys have probably have quite a bit of sim time as well, but a sim is great for procedures and IFR and certainly emergencies. But what a sim doesn't do well is give you the proprioceptive, that seat of the pants, and the vestibular, the inner ear inputs of flying. So you can't really replicate what the FAA calls the startle effect. And the startle effect is that split moment when you go into the clouds and you didn't know it was going to happen. Maybe you didn't turn around, maybe you didn't plan for it. They did a study recently that said that, particularly for the rotorcraft pilots, they have 56 seconds generally before they crash into the ground. From the time they go into the clouds to the time they hit the ground, it's usually about 56 seconds. And hopefully they survive it, but most of the time they don't. So Nick read my book, and he had a good friend who passed away in a spatial disorientation accident. He sold his Porsche, which he was tinkering and fixing up, an old one, and he used it to patent the device in 2016. He contacted me and said, look, you've got a lot of experience going into the clouds and surviving it. Would you like to be a partner? And I was skeptical, checked out the device. It was, I felt, the best training tool I'd ever seen for spatial disorientation. So you wear it, you just clip it on your hat. Like you're wearing right now. You just clip it on the hat. You have a little controller about the size of a deck of cards, and you can just hit it. It'll go cloud up, or you can use your phone. We have a little app that you can get for free, or your iPad, and you can just set it. Were you guys ever CFIs?
Both of us, yep.
Okay, so imagine this, and this is where Icarus excels. Icarus doesn't just work better than a normal hood and give you space if you have glasses and covers the peripheral. What it really does is weather decision making. So you imagine you're sitting at the table with a student. He or she is planning a few approaches. What's the weather I need at this airport today? And they give you the wrong weather. Well, now you can dial it in. So when they get down to minimums and they don't break out and they just briefed the missed approach and they start getting wonky, it might get a little scary for a second, but you're there. And I guarantee they'll never do that again. Icarus students, our CFIs are telling us that, and the DPEs that have flown with it, they say that students are literally coming in, breaking out at minimums, dropping the gear into flaps and landing without having to pass the controls. And the students who are new, they don't know that's not the way we've been doing it for 100 years. Visor technology, hood technology hasn't changed since Jimmy Doolittle first flew in the clouds in 1929. So this is hopefully what's going to turn the tide. And it's actually saved 2 people's lives already in a real world situation. A guy who was trained with the Icarus, he and his son got into the clouds and they were able to make it out safely. We sell it to colleges, flight schools, helicopter charter. Everybody seems to be buying this thing, and the military's testing it as well. And they're very excited about it. We hope to have some great news very soon about that too.
I think what's cool about it too is a hood is all or nothing. You either can't see anything or you see in its clear day. And the hardest part, I think, instrument flying, the hardest experience to get is the transition from instrument to visual, and it's unrealistic to just pull the hood up and then look outside. So the fact that you can set the visibility to half a mile and fly an ILS to true minimums and keep it on with and land at a half mile visibility, that's a whole different deal than landing it clear in a million after you pull the hood up,
It's a unique device. It's about the price of a really nice headset. It's not cheap. It's not free. We want to get it cheaper. But for right now, it, like you said, super lightweight. You can't see out the side. There's no way to cheat with the Icarus. Mm-hmm. And honestly, you could take a student out and just make them wear it from day one, and it'll just be clear, and they'll never know it, and they'll just forget about it. Where it also excels, I think, is for military folks. When you're out there and the weather's good, well, no, every day can be a bad weather day. Or perhaps maybe you're going to go land in the dust. The helicopters do the dust landings, right? You can get everybody in the helicopter with an Icarus, and you can control it, and it'll literally cloud up while they get ready to land. So now, instead of having to spend an extra month going to Kuwait to practice dust landings for your deployment to Iraq, leave your family, spend the money, move the equipment, you can just do it to a parking lot on a clear day. That's a huge savings versus moving an entire brigade or an air wing to a remote location in a third world country. You can do it right there in Chicago. You could do it in Yankee Stadium if you wanted to do it. So
it is a really clever device. We'll have a link in the show notes to check it out. You're right. The funniest thing, especially the demo person you have there, it does look like Luke Skywalker a little bit.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, absolutely. We need to get somebody better looking. That's Nick. I need to find somebody else.
Well, you cloud it over. You can't see the face.
Thank you. Maybe I should get an Icarus full face thing. Maybe an Icarus suit.
That is really cool. And how long does it battery last on it? I mean, you go do like a couple hour flight with it?
Oh, yeah. You could do about 6-7 hours with it, and the battery's no problem. Yeah.
So cool. Awesome. We're going to take a quick break from our conversation with Erik and the Icarus Device to talk about another situation where limited visibility can be a problem. And that, of course, is in the financial world. Oh, I made you laugh during this ad read, Max.
Weaving a tapestry.
Unbelievable. Tim, we're charging you extra for this one. Limited visibility, continuing into a situation you should not be in on your own, and that's navigating the financial waters. Pilots think that they know what they're doing. Maybe that's not always the case. Remember, Tim says, ask before you execute. So another set of eyes. You need that flight instructor sitting next to you while you're wearing that limited visibility device. Of course, we're talking about our friend, certified financial planner, Tim Pope, who helps professional pilots nationwide create and execute a smart financial strategy. Timothy P. Pope, your financial planning partner for all phases of your financial flight. Check the show notes for a link to book your free appointment with Tim. All right, back to the show. So, other than those two things, you've written a book. Tell us a little bit about some of the other stuff you've been up to.
Yeah, so 2011, I was in a mission in Afghanistan where my wingman got shot up and had to do an emergency landing. We were supporting this group of soldiers that was outnumbered 6-1 by the Taliban. They were going down a mountain, a big mountain, about 12,000 feet to a village to wipe out these Al-Qaeda and Taliban training camps. Then the whole area got encompassed with bad weather. My crew was the only one left there to save them. And my medic, who was 39-year-old single mom, fractured her leg, and she conducted 14 hoists under fire unarmed with a fractured leg over 3 days. We executed, I think, the first inadvertent IMC hoist at max power, so we had no power left, and we went into the clouds at 200 feet above a mountain with her and a patient on the hoist. Did a whole bunch of crazy rescues. She did, my crew, not me. And that was the impetus for a phone call I got from my boss that said, hey, Newsweek wants to talk to you. And I was like, what? Newsweek? Yeah. So we ended up on the cover of Newsweek magazine. She's not on the cover because it was right during hurricane in New York City. If you remember that, Sandy, right? I went to all these different events and I met some famous people, and people started asking if I wanted to write a book. I was the commander of the mission. I said, I don't think so. Then I found out a couple producers were going to make a film without our permission. I had a book deal with a big company and I turned it down because it just seemed a little bit slimy to me, frankly. And I went to a guy named Dale Dye. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Band of Brothers, the series.
Yeah.
Colonel Sink, the character, ought to have y'all shot, that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we connected. He liked the story and he has a publishing company. He wrote Platoon and he wrote a bunch of books. So I did it with him. Became a bestseller. And I put it out. It's a true story. It's from me. I didn't use a ghostwriter, which means it's probably not the world's greatest book, but it's true and it's honest. And that's probably all I could have hoped for. I didn't make any money or anything like that, but it covered the costs and it got the word out. And to be honest, the best thing about the book, well, the twofold. Now, sometimes I get to meet guys and gals that I've saved, people that we rescued downrange, which is a tremendous honor because of HIPAA. You don't get to follow up with them. Did they make it? Are they okay? And then honestly, the book has probably helped me with RTAG, helping the charity, getting the word out, getting the information that the helicopter pilots can handle stressful situations and do things like that. I've done a little bit of work in Hollywood as a technical advisor on a couple things, a few movies, but it's not something like, oh, wow, it's such a great job. I would rather be in Afghanistan than in Hollywood because then you know who really means you harm. And some of the stuff that they come up with, man, there was a TV show, I won't mention it, but some friends of mine were working on it and they asked for a little bit of coverage. Hey, can you help us out with this? And when it came out, it was just awful. So bad that they, even though they were getting paid for it, they took their name off of it. So I don't feel like it's my calling, but I do like writing. I do write for some other online magazines and stuff. I like to talk about veteran stuff. but mostly it's the charity that I do in my free time. And fly. Oh, yeah, right. I'm an airline pilot, too. Gotta remember that.
We always love to get a good story from our guests before we let them go. I'm guessing you have many. Do you have a good story for us today?
Okay. This didn't happen to me.
Okay.
All right. But I had a friend of mine who was flying around in a Black Hawk with another aircraft, and they were in the middle of a long day of missions. They wanted to stop and use the bathroom, and they had to drop some people off anyway. So they both land in this landing zone. It's covered in gravel, and T barriers, these big tan barriers around. And there's some John Deere Gators, remember those little like 4-wheel little vehicles, and then some Porta-Potties and whatever, some tents. They land, they bring the power control levers to idle, and they're just saving gas. And in the back, you have the 2 crew chiefs, and they're always arguing. They're always yelling at each other. And I think the argument today was that one didn't help the other one wash the aircraft the last time. And they're bickering. The pilots are sitting up front like, what's going on? The left crew chief in the back says, well, I'm going to use the bathroom. Left rear is coming off ICS. He disconnects and he goes to the bathroom. The right rear crew chief's like, I'm so sick of this guy. I'm sick of his crap. Pilots say, what are you going to do about it? I'll tell you what I'm going to do about it. I'm going to fix it right now. I'm coming off ICS. And he disappears as well and walks across the nose of the aircraft and disappears. Follows him to the bathroom. Like, oh, what's going to happen? The next thing the pilots see is him running across the other side to one of the John Deere Gators on the other wall. And then they see the John Deere Gator fly in front of them in the cockpit and aim to the Porta-Potty. And he's got ramming speed, man. And he hits it. And he backs it up and he hits it again. And he keeps hitting it until blue juice is bopping out of the sides of the door and someone in there screaming. Then he hits it again. Last time, parks it right there. Doors bent in, pulls the parking brake, and gets out and walks over to the aircraft. And he's just full of them. He's it's the greatest thing ever. He's going to have to get cleaned up, probably ruined his flight suit. He gets in the back, climbs in, saddles in, gets his cable, hooks up. He goes, that'll show him for dissing me on the wash. And he hears, show who? And he looks over, and it's his crew chief. Somebody else was in the Porta-John, and they did a very hasty takeoff, and they left. And that poor guy doesn't even know what he did to deserve that to this day. That's
oh my God.
Yeah.
I love it.
I miss that part of the war. I don't miss the rockets, but
oh, man.
I miss the hilarity,
Yeah.
I bet.
That's awesome. Well, Eric, what is the name of your book for our listeners that want to check it out?
Yeah, it's called Dustoff 7.3. You can get it anywhere. Amazon's fine. If you get it off Amazon, we donate money to Fisher House. What we do make off it. Amazon takes almost all the money, just so you know.
Yeah.
But you can get it at Walmart, wherever you want to get it. It's paperback. You get the audio book as well and the e-reader. So it's out there if you want it.
Awesome. We will have a link in the show notes, not to the Amazon page, just somewhere else. Eric, it's amazing to hear what you're doing for the veterans, and it's exciting. I mean, especially in this current environment where folks are getting jobs, people are able to make the transition out of the military pretty quickly. But that's not always going to be the case. We always tell our listeners, like, aviation is cyclical. When it's really great and hiring, that's not the way it always is. We just saw the pandemic and that slowed down. But a lot of these support groups like yours are there in the good times and the bad. And I think that's what's important, is to get connected with these groups where you can find support. Because it's not always going to be easy. There are going to be challenges. But I think when you can find community and you can find other people on the kind of the same path as you, like you mentioned with Facebook groups and things like that, that is really helpful when you're kind of on this march through aviation. So hats off to you for creating an awesome group to help our service members.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on. It's been a real pleasure. Maybe I get to see you at MBAA. If not, maybe you come on down to Texas. Everything's bigger there. And we'd love to have you guys do a live show from the convention. It'd be awesome.
That would be awesome. We will have all the information for that show and all the other things you're up to on our website. Thanks for joining us, Eric.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Too.
All right, Max. Always amazing to talk to people
No slouch.
like Eric. Yeah.
Dude, it's no slouch.
Unbelievable where he gets the time for anything. And then he just recently got hired by a major airline, and he's going through training there. So
Yeah,
good luck, Eric.
pressure.
Yeah.
Thanks for all you do, Eric. And I'm telling you, from a fixed-wing pilot, I know I mentioned it during the interview, but helicopter flying is very mysterious. And when you actually fly in a helicopter for an extended period of time, gives you a really great appreciation for what those guys and gals do.
Absolutely. Okay. We're going to chat with Jordan Scales for a minute. He was part of that Auburn Business Aviation Days event that we talked about a few months ago, and they're doing another one in Florida. So let's see what...
Let's get the update.
Here we go. All right, back by popular demand, it's Jordan Scales, aircraft manager with Clay Lacy and notable Auburn University alumni. Jordan, you joined us last year with Will, and you guys were doing the Business Aviation Days at Auburn. Had a few listeners ask, how did that go? And then I wanted to check in with you about that and see where it's going next.
Absolutely. I was extremely fortunate to be able to support Will in his vision of the Business Aviation Day there at Auburn. Phenomenal. It was a multi-day event, and to see so many industry professionals that took a good chunk out of their week to support this initiative of creating industry exposure to students at that level, and for the vast number of companies that were able to show up. And I mean, you guys should have seen like the static display that they put on. It knocked the socks off like a lot of the regional shows, NBAA regional events that we go to. And so that in itself too, for all these groups to bring in, this so much heavy metal to this event to show students the magnificent machines that are at the core of our business. The student engagement with the professional was top notch. Seeing all these professionals go with the classes and have these intimate moments with the students, I mean, it was awesome, top to bottom. It's creating a lot of momentum for this narrative that is currently in discussion about the industry stepping down and reaching further into the university setting. And so I'm excited that that event went well, and it's snowballing off of that and all this momentum that's going. And now we have the Central Florida Business Aviation Association's Business Aviation Day, which I'm fortunate enough to have a hand in coordinating. They heard of my involvement. I think it was actually your show.
Yes.
Now I'm thinking I think it was actually our previous podcast. Their vice president heard of my involvement with Will and Auburn's event, and he said, man, we got to do something like that down here. We put our heads together, and very coincidentally, Embry-Riddle happened to be having their week of flight because they touch on various different aviation disciplines, from space to business aviation to commercial, everything. And the event ran Monday through Thursday, and so Friday was available, but it was still within the same kind of narrative that they had for the entire week. And so they said, hey, let's kind of partner together to have this event. Very fortunate to be able to partner with an institution like Embry-Riddle on this, but the event is not exclusive to Embry-Riddle. We are in contact with just about every aviation school within the state of Florida, from Miami to the Panhandle. We're touching everybody, and as well as the Institute of Aviation Maintenance that's there in Orlando. So, I mean, we're really casting a wide net because we want to have as much student involvement and participation as possible. It's becoming really exciting.
So I'm just looking at the flyer here. You guys have got a career fair, resume drop-off, headshots, internships, networking. There's a ton of different opportunities for folks that are attending. What's a resume drop-off?
Yeah. So the students that attend the event, they will be able to, via QR code, scan this code and send CFBAA their resume. And all of the resumes that we collect throughout the day, we'll be sharing with our corporate partners. So that's an incentive in itself, for a student to show up, knowing that by a click of a button on their phone, they can shoot their resume to the 20 various different corporate partners that we have attending the event.
It's so cool.
Technology, man.
Yeah, that is great. And is there going to be a static display again?
Of course, man. What is a business aviation event without a static display? So we are very fortunate to have our OEM partners bringing in some birds. We have some of our local operators that are going to be bringing us some aircraft. We're really excited about the Unmanned Safety Institute. It's actually based local to Florida, and they are going to be bringing their mobile command unit. So the Unmanned Safety Institute is involved in unmanned flight, UAVs, drones, and such. And they're bringing an aircraft, and they're bringing their mobile command center trailer. So the student can really get a holistic view of their operation, seeing the aircraft on static and then being able to go inside the trailer, look at the aerial mapping and get a sense of like what the pilot sees when he's flying that aircraft. So we're super excited about them. So through all that, we'll have business jets, turboprops, piston, unmanned stuff. So to have like a full breadth of the industry, I think is pretty cool.
Any interesting speakers or industry folks going to be there?
Yep, absolutely. I'm glad you asked that. We are very excited to have our keynote speakers involved with this event. We're going to have MBAA's president and CEO, Mr. Ed Bolin, as our keynote speaker, and he's actually going to be sharing that stage with Embraer Executive Jets CEO, Mr. Michael Malfitano. And I'm not sure if you've ever seen these two speak together, but they have amazing chemistry, and I know that they've been working on an amazing presentation for our students, speaking on the current state of the industry, where we see it in the future, and what the students can do to best position themselves for a successful career when that time comes.
That's awesome. Sounds like a really cool event.
Yeah, it's great. And it's so cool to hear how you leveraged this Auburn event, got a regional partner involved. Do you think this could become an annual thing, or maybe create a model for other regional groups? Where do you see this going next?
All of the above. All of the above. It's my understanding that the group does intend for this to be an annual event. That's why they call this one 2022, because they intend for there to be a 3, 4, and so on. But you may have seen it already. There are certain regional groups that have adopted the mold and are creating similar events. I know the regional group out there in Arizona, I believe they had a pretty good event.
Yeah, shout out.
With Texturon. And I believe there's an event in Minnesota. I think Jessica Belcher is helping and coordinating an event out in Minnesota that's supposed to be very awesome and have a lot of industry involvement. There's just all these pockets throughout the U.S. that are starting to see the importance of this initiative that we have going on, and they're doing what it takes to step up to the plate and create these connections. So I think it's awesome. I'm so excited to see kind of where this momentum takes us 3, 4, 5 years from now, because it's something that's much needed.
Well, we salute you and the Central Florida Business Aviation Association for putting this together. We're excited to hear how it goes. We'll get you out of here on this question, Jordan.
Yes, sir.
Do you think Max remembers the mascot of the Auburn University?
Oh, man.
Should we even give him 2 choices? I don't know.
I hope he surprises me. So lay it on me. What's our mascot?
Is it the War Eagle or the Tiger, Max?
It's so confusing. I don't understand. In photos, it clearly looks like a tiger, not a war eagle. So I still don't get it.
So the mascot is a tiger. It is a tiger.
Ding, ding, ding.
War Eagle is our battle cry, and it's more of a kind of motivational force. But our mascot, our physical mascot, is a tiger. And shout outs to Albie the Tiger, the 7-time over national mascot of the year. I think he may be 8 now. I'm not sure. But he's doing his thing on there.
I love it. All right.
But before we close out, I would like to tell your audience, so that this Business Aviation Day event is next Friday, April 1st at Shelter Daytona Beach. If you have that time to spend, it's from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So the entire day, lunch and breakfast is provided in case you need any more incentive. But if you have the time, stop by. It's really going to be an awesome event.
That is awesome, Jordan. Well, good work on that. We'll have all the information on our website and links so that you can attend that if you're in the Florida area. And well done, sir.
Thank you very much, guys. It's a pleasure being on here.
Thanks, Jordan.
All right.
All right, man. Have a good one. All right. Another overachiever in aviation.
All these guys are just making us feel bad. EMTs running around, dudes writing books.
Hey, we have a podcast here.
It's true.
People write us and say that it's important.
Therefore it is.
Think about what it would have been like if all these events were available when we were young, budding aviators. It's just amazing that the resources that are out there now. So I hope people are taking advantage of them.
Absolutely. All right. I think that's going to do it for number 74. Thank you for overcoming technical and geographic challenges to join me today, Max. It's a true testament to your commitment to aviation. And
no, it's my pleasure, Tom.
I love it. Well, thanks to Erik Sabiston. Thanks to Jordan Scales. Thanks to our friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy, Harvey Watt, Tim Pope, our partners in bringing you top-notch professional pilot content. We'll have another episode for you here in a couple of weeks. Until then, remember,
flexibility is the key to recording a podcast and air power.
That's right. Relationships are tough.
One of your famous quotes.
That's right. All right. We'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.